All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Politi here, Lanny Fonseca. Fellas, do you know what we are? We're the third best audio in New Jersey from the New Jersey Press Association. And I got a question for you. Really relevant question. Is this something we should be celebrating? Or are we just the second or are we just the second loser? Discussed amongst yourselves.
A lot of adversity this year, injuries, illness.
That's good. We overcame the toughest podcast schedule in New Jersey. Can we use that one?
Sure.
Yeah.
We had technical difficulties on our own part, right?
Yes.
Like we don't have the contributions, the funding for better audio equipment, so we're kind of working against the rest of the field. Yes. So
we'd be blaming ourselves. That'd be great. Oh, if our audio was better, we'd be first. Well, whose fault is that? Whose fault is that?
As long as none of us enter the transfer portal, we'll be okay for next year.
I still wonder who are the first two, and more importantly, who finished fourth. Those are my questions about that. But thank you to our listeners for supporting New Jersey's third finest audio for 2024. Bravo. All right, let's talk Minnesota basketball. Boys went out there and won a game, won their home finale. Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey walked off the court victorious in their final game, as did three seniors who had mixed levels of participation in the game. A good effort. I mean, I don't know. They looked good in the first half, blew the lead, got an extra 5 minutes of bonus Dylan Harper time, and he was great. I think that's basically the story of the game there. Took over in overtime. The kind of result that we expected from him, if not the season we expected from him.
I thought Rutgers was at its best when Dylan Harper was being aggressive and getting to the basket. The first 10 minutes of the game were horrendous to watch. Like, if you liked old school Rutgers basketball under Steve Peichel, those first 10 minutes were bliss. It was just brick city, good defense, I guess. No one really doing anything. And then Dylan Harper kind of takes over second half of the first half. Rutgers builds a big lead. Dylan Harper goes to the bench with Ace Bailey for 4 minutes. Minnesota comes all the way back. Dylan Harper leads them to nearly a win at the end of regulation, and then they give up the tying basket. And then Dylan Harper leads them to victory in overtime. So the point here is essentially when you have Dylan Harper and you're playing a roughly equal team, you're probably going to come out on top. And it was a fun way for them to end the season. I think a lot of people expressed the thought of like what this last game could have been, the potential implications, rather than, you win your 11th in the Big Ten, you lose your 14th or 13th or whatever it was. But I think for what it was a nice memory Dylan Harper sent himself out on at the rack.
Yeah. He was there afterward, Pat, signing autographs, lingered on the court a bit. He was in no hurry for this moment. And I think he recognized, we asked him about it, of course, is this your last game? And, he tried to play the whole, I'm not thinking about that. But then his answers were like, yeah, that's it. I mean, essentially,
It's interesting. Yeah. I wasn't there, so I can't comment specifically on the answer. But if you're telling me that, I mean, it sounded like just an admission through the admission eventually came is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone knows he's not coming back. He understands it. He played a lot. I mean, it's funny. It just, I think that's just, they think they have to announce these things. They think they've got to be in the moment. He has said that, like, I want to be where my feet are. My mom tells me that. But there's a recognition. And we asked him about like just the season as a whole. I thought his answer was great. Like, he's like, look, it wasn't perfect, but that's life. It's a pretty mature thing for a 19-year-old to say.
That's very mature. And there, like we said at the beginning of the podcast, there was some adversity that hit, and just like the football team could have went down and really floundered from there, but at least there were some positives down the stretch here. So I think you had some good and some bad scattered throughout the season. And like we've said time and time again, it was just the inconsistency that just really plagued this team. Like they could just never really put together 2 really good weeks to swing things around or change the narrative of the team. So, but yeah, I think that was a scene that some Rutgers fans will remember and be thankful for.
Couple things. One, I was under the impression Greg Schiano invented the "Be Where Your Feet Are" slogan. So did he steal it from Maria Harper?
Right.
Did Maria Harper
Apparently.
take it from him?
I think, yeah.
I'm curious about the origins of that. And second of all, I think it's a bad sign for where the season went that Dylan Harper is going nihilistic. Usually you get nihilistic around 21, 22 when you start drinking. Like Dylan's already thinking, it's life, things kind of happen. What are you going to do? All this is meaningless anyway. Whatever.
1 year in Piscataway, it's all it took. New Brunswick is like he was on a bus someplace trying to get from class in New Brunswick. He's like, what is the meaning of all this anyway? Let's be honest. Yeah, that's good.
By the end of my freshman year, I was still kind of hopeful, young and spry. Dylan experienced 4 years of college within 4 months and kind of just like,
that would have been a good line for my column. I wish he had said that beforehand. That's a great point. Yeah. He did make a line. He thinks the adversity will help him. He's probably right. He's obviously going to go to a bad NBA team. He's going to be playing in New Orleans or someplace Washington on a bad team. He's going to have a lot of losses. He's going to have to learn how to deal with it. Those kids from Duke, huh? They never had to deal with this crap, right? This is one advantage. This is Maria Harper, the Harper family thinking this through. Like, what would better prepare my son for the NBA? Would it be going to La La Land down there in Durham with the fake Gothic buildings, or would it be going to, New Brunswick and getting my ass kicked occasionally and playing Minnesota for 11th place on a Sunday afternoon in March? I don't know. I think that's probably they figured it out.
Yeah, I'm sure not being in the NCAA tournament, playing in these marquee games with the cameras and the bright lights and everything at stake, that's not a good preparation.
Anybody can do that, Pat. Anybody can do that. Come on, this is a different experience. We kid.
That's right.
Now, look, a lot of people have played in the NCAA tournament. A lot of people have played in the NIT.
Yes.
Nobody in the history of college basketball has ever played in the college basketball crown. Ever.
Let's go there. That's good. Yes, I was going to save that for later in the podcast, but let's go there. I decided to ask Steve Peichel a question about the college basketball crown. And, I ask a lot of questions. There are times when you're halfway through the question and you're like, I wish I hadn't asked this question. This was one of the, what I'm talking about. You're like, Steve. And I preface it by saying, Steve, I know you're not going to want to talk about this. And if that's the intro to your question, you probably shouldn't have asked the question. That's a good sign. You're asking the wrong question. But I get there and he's looking at me like, oh, where's this going? And I say the words college basketball crown. He's already shaking his head before I can finish the sentence. I don't have any more clarity. It's funny. Like, I don't have any more clarity as to whether or not they're going to be invited to that or not. It seems like there's a decent chance that they get a couple wins maybe in Indianapolis. I don't know, but it's kind of fascinating that the postseason for Rutgers could be played out at the end of the month in this random tournament that lasts over, a span of a few days in Las Vegas. I mean, that could be where this is headed. I think it's more likely than the NIT.
There are a lot of questions about how the selection process works out, right? We know there are 2 automatic bids for the top 2 teams from the Big 10, the Big 12, and I believe the Big East. Not the Big 12.
The Big 12, Big 10, and the SEC, I think, right?
No, the SEC isn't the SEC ESPN?
I don't know.
Anyway, no, it's the Fox property. So it's the Big 10, the Big East, and
the Big
maybe
East?
it is the SEC.
I think it's
yes.
It's anyway, the real.
The point is, we know for a fact Big 10 is in that group. That's all that matters.
Yeah, right.
Now the clarity we need is the top 2 teams that don't make it in terms of what? The Big 10 standings or the net? If it's the latter, Rutgers has pretty much no chance because they have the 3rd worst net in the Big 10. I mean, Iowa, USC, Penn State, Nebraska all have better nets than Rutgers.
Right.
If it's the same committee style as the NCAA tournament where they take the totality of the regular season and your resume that way, Rutgers has, again, one of the worst resumes in the Big 10. So I don't know. I personally think Rutgers shouldn't even want to make this tournament. It makes zero sense. It starts a week after the portal opens, so you might have like half your roster available. There is no shot on earth, I think, that Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey will play in it because it would be pretty dumb for them personally.
Yeah.
Now, my question is, if Rutgers doesn't make it to the crown, does the NIT invite them? I'm not sure because these things are now, divvied up by TV. NIT is an ESPN property. The crown is a Fox property. Does the NIT or ESPN want to promote a Big 10 team that doesn't play on their network? It's sad that we've gotten to this point where, we're politicking by TV networks, not by the quality of a team's resume and program and all that stuff. But that to me seems like the reality. So I think we'll get some clarity in the next week or two. Probably.
Well, we might, but even then, I mean, this thing is played after the portal not only is open, but it has been open. Like, who the hell knows who's going to be on this team by the time or any team by the time the crown? It's like really just a bad idea to put that at the end of the month for teams that are not playing for the real championship. There's going to be guys who are in, out, moving around. I mean, Rutgers might be like one of those bowl games during COVID years, Pat, where Rutgers is like, we don't have enough. We only got 4 players here. We're not going to come with 3 freshmen and Jordan Durkak to we can't. You know what I'm talking about?
Right. Yeah. It's really, really interesting from that perspective. Like what and just to get back to like the whole football debate, like what is the right? At least football, you're playing an extra game, you're training, you're developing younger players, you have those extra practices. But for basketball, I don't know, like what's the benefit of an elongated season that hasn't gone your way? So especially when you factor in the transfer portal, obviously this is a program that needs to be at the forefront of anything that's happening in the portal. So you'd think that practicing and playing would be detrimental to that aspect of their off season. So yeah, I think it's a bad idea all the way around. And it's just it's just another money grab from these conferences to put a product out there that's not good, but people are still going to consume, which is fascinating in its own self.
Counter TV programming. Exactly.
Right.
Well, what's the reason? Hang a banner, Pat. You don't want to have a giant college basketball crown champion right up there next to the Final Four. Yeah, they can't take it away from you.
It'd be great if instead of a crown, there's a trophy on it. They could get that wrong too. It's like, yeah.
Well, on the banner.
On the banner, it's like, they could have put a crown on that. No, it's a trophy. Oh well. Maybe they give out a crown. They should do that. They should give the winning team. What if they do that? Give the winning team a crown. That's a great idea. I should be running this thing. Come on, move it up.
That'd be fun. Yeah,
give out a crown.
And look,
I figured it out.
For the TV networks, they don't care if it's 5 guys, literally like 3 freshmen, Jordan Durkak, and a walk-on. They don't care because all they need is 2 logos to fill in a certain TV slot, so they get their money, and so that bettors who want to have one last hit. The NCAA tournament doesn't play for another day. They need their fix. Here's Rutgers, TCU or whatever.
-6.5 against Tennessee State, whatever the hell it is. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
But before that happens, the crown. How many teams make the crown?
So 12, and it's important to clarify the 6 automatic bids, 2 from each of those 3 leagues that we mentioned, which we'll figure out which ones they are after the pod. They cannot decline. They're contractually obligated to play in the tournament.
I thought it was 16. It's 12.
I'm fairly certain it's 12. It could be 16. Who knows? We make up the rules as we go. It doesn't really matter.
I don't know anything about the crown. We're not qualified to talk about this. All right, let's talk about a tournament. We are qualified to talk about Big Ten tournament. Wednesday night, Southern Cal. We know that. I think if you were to pick a team to play in the first round, all right, Southern Cal, a team you handled last time you played them. Talented, but certainly flawed. I think that is a good matchup for the Scarlet Knights. Do you agree?
I agree. I mean, they're one-on-one team that depends on individual talent. They go about 5 or 6 deep, and I don't think they care. I really don't think they care about the season anymore. I mean, they got blitzed, destroyed in a rivalry game against UCLA on Saturday. And I think Rutgers showed, they had a pretty good grasp on beating them when they played the first time. So yeah, I could certainly see this being a game where Rutgers kind of runs away with it. One of the rare games that happens. But the issue is that if they do beat USC, they're going to play the team that demolished them by 29 points last week. So Rutgers was kind of in a weird balance yesterday where if they won, they'd have a better first round and worse second round. If they lost, they'd have a harder first round against Iowa, but their second round opponent would have been Wisconsin, who's on a complete downswing. I guess if you want an easier first round, Rutgers won. That was good. If you wanted an easier path, I think the other side of the bracket would have been better.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Yeah, but Purdue in this, it's tough. Thursday night after playing a game, your legs are tired. You get Purdue. Yeah,
in Indianapolis.
In Indianapolis.
In Indianapolis.
That's not what you want.
It's a bad matchup.
Yeah.
And think about it like this: Rutgers played one of its best games against USC. Probably can replicate that from a scoring perspective, but it still gave up 45, 50 points in the paint against USC.
Yeah.
So maybe USC makes a couple adjustments, right? Good coaching staff. it's probably the best matchup, but still, I still think it's still not it's not an easy win per se, in my opinion.
I was trying to think about this, like what would make this a successful trip to Indianapolis for Rutgers in your mind? Discount the idea that they're going to win it, and I get all I did get. I love the optimism. Some people are just never. A text this morning. Look, if they win the first, Ace comes alive and they win 4 games, there's a chance they can get at large if they go to the final. I'm like, number one, that's wrong. Number two, I could grow back my hair and win a Pulitzer. Like those are 2 things about like what you're gonna win. Come on, this is you're gonna win in order to win this thing. I love it. You got to beat USC, then beat a Purdue team that beat you by 29, then beat a fully rested Michigan team, and then win 2 more games.
Michigan or Michigan State? Michigan. You're right.
Michigan.
You're right.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I've got it right in front of me. So yeah, and then win 2 more games. That's other than that, piece of cake. But no. So what do you think is? And for me, I think if this team gets to the weekend, it is a smashing success because then fans will wake up on Saturday with that. Oh, I don't know. No, maybe maybe this is it. I think if you get to Friday and you play Michigan and a good game, you could say, all right, that's probably better than you expected. But if you lose, if you go 1 and out, I think then it's just indicative of the entire season's disappointed. You guys disagree? Agree? What do you think?
I agree. Yeah, like beating Purdue in a situation where they just completely splattered you a week ago would be a successful showing, and you could say, all right, when the lights were on, like Rutgers played pretty well, and it gives you that optimism, like you're saying, like you can see the path. And I mean, Rutgers' best matchup I thought this year was against Michigan. It on paper it shouldn't have been, but Rutgers played Michigan really well twice. So if you are able to upset Purdue, that optimism then starts shooting up. I would think so.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a little ray of hope there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would think that would be a big deal. Then maybe your postseason, whether it's the Crown or NIT, becomes a little bit more respectable. And maybe those guys play. Maybe it's a little bit more of a fun thing down the stretch. But 1 and out, yeah, it's just exactly what you expected from this team.
Sorry to cut you off, Pat.
No, all good.
If we're looking at this from preseason expectations, a successful Big Ten tournament is winning the whole damn thing. Clearly, we're well past that.
Yes, we're
looking at it. If we're looking at it from current expectations, winning 1 game is a success because you'll be an underdog massively in the second round, right? I think a nice middle ground here is if you beat Purdue, then you feel pretty good. You have a nice little memory. And then if you beat Michigan and go to the semifinals, you officially are the deepest into the tournament you've ever been as a program, which I guess counts as success.
Absolutely.
Right? Again, the issue is that things aren't linear, right? It's not like, oh, they made it to the semifinals this year. Maybe next year they'll take a step forward without the 2 NBA lottery picks, the 2 best players they'll ever have in this program. It feels hard to kind of say that, but I guess that to me would be the positive. And I think it would be a run to the semifinals, upsets over Michigan and Purdue would be a memory from the season, because otherwise, like, I'm struggling to think of a memory. Like, they asked the guys, the senior 3 senior guys in an in-house video over the weekend for senior day, what was your favorite memory of the season? And all 3 of them said the Dylan Harper game-winning shot against the worst Seton Hall team literally in program history. There has never been a worse Seton Hall team ever.
Right. Yeah.
At least record-wise. That's their best memory. I think this is their last chance of making something, at least something that people could look back on the season, and instead of immediately thinking, wow, what a bummer that year was, they could say, hey, at least they went to the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament.
Is that really the answer to that question? Wow. God, I can't come up with a
better
one.
It is, though. It is, yeah.
What about Vegas? You lost those games, so you can't. I mean, that was pretty memorable for me. You beat UCLA at home. That doesn't count. I guess it wasn't much of not a great UCLA team, but they're still seeded, I don't know, 4th in this thing. I don't know. That's a good question.
They're a good UCLA team, but they were playing across the country in the worst stretch of the season. Their coach just essentially ripped their entire roster's manhood. They weren't exactly in a great mental space. And Rutgers was desperate, right? They just got Dylan Harper back. They had lost 3 games in a row. They had to, show some life. So, I mean, not to downplay the win, but my point is, like, I'm not sure that's exactly
It wasn't a dramatic game. It wasn't a memorable game. Yeah, it certainly wasn't Ron Harper versus Purdue kind of game. Yeah, I guess that's it. That's Seton Hall game. Wow. Man.
I mean, the memories are like, our 5-star freshman had an incredible performance in a loss.
Yeah, that's true. That's what their memories are. I will never forget that Indiana game by Ace Bailey. They lost the game. Yeah, I mean, that was memorable, certainly. Vegas against Alabama was about as, that to me was as in a high point as you can come up with. They took what I think might be the national champion to the, and down the wire in this incredible fun to watch game. But yeah, it's tough coming up with more than that. It's wild. Man.
Ace Bailey dropping 37 on Northwestern and they win. I mean, like, that's fun, but Northwestern is, they're the third or fourth worst team in the Big Ten. It's not,
yeah.
And the best game of the season was probably the loss to Princeton. That was like an absolute.
That's
doozy.
True. Yeah, it was fun. That was a fun game. Yeah.
A bad Princeton team, by the way, at least by their standards.
Yeah. We didn't. At the time we thought, it'll be an okay loss. No, it wasn't. Yeah, man. All right. Send us your favorite moment from the season, and we'll put it in the next podcast. All right. So yeah, I think semifinals, smashing success, good victory over Purdue, a success. If you want to, even if you beat Southern Cal and you just kind of go meekly, and then I don't know, you're just kind of like, I mean, one shining Wednesday, as I put in my column today. One shining Wednesday. You got to do better than that. Come on, give me something. Give me the Friday. Give me a second night in Indianapolis, the airport courtyard. Mistakes were made in this trip, man. Let me tell you.
Oh boy, I'm also staying at the airport. It's not great. There are really two ways I see this happening. They either have the last year scenario, the 2018-19 scenario, where they show up in the first round and just lose a game because they, their bodies are there, their minds are already, to steal the NBA slogan, 1, 2, 3 Cancooning. They're already thinking about Cancun and after the season. But the other scenario is we get between Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, one of them could have a Corey Sanders at Madison Square Garden stretch where they just go berserk. I think that's certainly possible. And I think that's the one shred of hope Rutgers fans could hope for, is that we have Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. Maybe something happens, right? Like, that's kind of their only because look, to Pat's point, right? Like, against USC, they had a good game. They still gave up 50 points in the paint. That is almost a given in every game they play.
Like 40 against Minnesota, right? And I can't.
Yes, like it was 40 something.
So we were making fun of the kid, the center from Minnesota, made himself like $300,000 in the portal after that game.
Yeah, he looked pretty good. The backup center, to be clear.
The backup center, exactly. Guys getting paid, going someplace and like Creighton's going to give him some money. You watch. All right. Questions? Do some questions. All right, sure. We got some questions. A lot of blame questions. Let's start with this one before we do the blame questions. Any word on when the GM position for Hoops is going to be posted? Short answer, no. But the long answer, and this is interesting now since it's March 10th, is that whenever it's posted, it will not help this year, right? Like this mythical person, so it's not going to come in a position to make an impact on the roster for next year, which I think is really sort of a critical observation. I guess one, some people have made already, that it'll be too late for this year. But I think the way it's taken now, I mean, there was a chance they could have posted that in February, chance they could have gotten someone in the building, and there could have been someone there to at least have an input, if not make decisions or not steer the process. But now forget it. There won't be anybody in place, which means that, what's going to be, and we're talking about this a little bit in the press area, what's going to be just a crazy offseason for this team. I mean, the portal is going to smash open in a couple of weeks, and they're going to have to get, not just 3 starters. They're going to have to get like 3 elite players and, divvy up $4 million in the process to try to keep the players on the roster. This is unprecedented offseason for this team, and it's going to be, Steve Peichel making all these decisions. So,
even if they were hired today, the portal opens in 2 weeks. I feel like that's cramming a lot of stuff into 2 weeks. I agree.
Yeah, forget it.
I mean, to your point, like they have to add a center. Like that's got to be a priority. They have to add a point guard, right? I mean, unless you go with Jeremiah as your point guard, which I mean,
they have to add a point guard.
They have to add a point guard. They have to add a center, which are probably the 2 most expensive positions outside of forward who could hit threes. They probably have to add a forward, right, to replace Ace Bailey. There are a lot of priorities to fill on this roster. There's look, the only way there is a general manager who can help them in this cycle is if, and hear me out here, there is an internal promotion to that position. If someone is already on the staff, they boost them up. Steve Hain, I don't really know what he's doing. Maybe they boost him up to GM and he kind of, I don't know. I'm joking here. I think but I mean, you've seen the way this program is operating.
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I think, no, of course not. No, of course not. Absolutely wouldn't be shocked at all. Yeah. But I think that would be the absolute worst case scenario, and nothing against people on the staff. You need someone with fresh ideas from the outside. We saw what happened the last couple of years with the portal. And again, resources are a big part of that. But again, this is like the Rutgers way. Like, it's always like, he's got, Steve's right over here. It's never like, let's go out and find let's go out, look at all these candidates and find someone who's got, experience in doing this stuff. So I think that would be a mistake, obviously. But even if it was Steve, it's someone on staff, it's still going to be, it's just too late to help this year. I think it's going to be the same processes they've used in the past. And Pat, just think about that for a minute. This is the first time Rutgers has ever had this amount of resources to spend. They're going to have around $3 million from the house settlement. We don't know the exact number, but we think it's about that. They're going to have $1 million again from the NIL money from Vegas. I'm sure there's another, kick 500,000, 250,000, whatever it is, kicking around. We see the fundraising they're doing now for that match thing that we talked about last week in the episode. So there's going to be, $4 to $5 million spent. You would think you got to spend that. You cannot screw that up. You've got to get 3 Big Ten elite players with that money.
This is as pivotal of an offseason and not just from we have to get these players, right? You have to resell this program. Like, you have to recruit these players to want to come here. It was hard enough to sell players to come and play with Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. Can you imagine selling this program to players in the portal? Yep. We're in a complete rebuild. That's what it is.
Now you got two things. You got money and you've got playing time.
Right.
That's what you have to offer.
Sure.
So you're just you're just shopping around in that. You hope that's going to attract some people, right?
And it should.
And shots, because you're losing about 34 shots per game with Ace and Dylan going to the NBA. I do think there is a scenario here, right? I don't think it's unrealistic that Rutgers ends up having a year like Seton Hall did this year, where they revamp their entire roster. They just don't manage to get enough talent or enough fits or whatever, and they have a really rough year. Like I don't know if that's guaranteed, right? I think they certainly have there is a world where Rutgers nails it in the portal. They bring back a ton of guys and they have this foundation and they have a decent year in the Big Ten. I think that's certainly possible. I think it's equally as plausible that got a lot of guys leave. Some of the freshman foundation leave. The incoming freshman class isn't ready to play. You don't really nail your transfer additions, and then you're staring at a single win season.
I got to tell you though, the narrative at Seton Hall is better in that situation than it'll be at Rutgers. I mean, the narrative at Seton Hall is they went to the NIT. They were ill prepared they lost all those guys in the portal. It's Shaheen Holloway's second year. I don't know. It's like, all right, so now you've got to be better. Now I think they're going to spend. You would imagine they've got to figure that out internally to give money. Like, I think if you're like, it's a little harder. Right? What happened? Oh, what's the Rutgers narrative for that? Well, we've done this a million times. We're like round of 32, Dayton, NIT, didn't make it. And then you're telling me 7 wins? It's going to be the white hot furnace of a hot seat on Steve Michael. That's the case. I don't think they can do that. That just can't. They've got to climb. This thing has got to be back at least to where it is this year, and I think better. Like or it's going to be he will enter the year after that on a scorching hot seat.
I didn't think they could miss the NCAA tournament this year. They did. Rutgers can do a lot of things, my friend, that you don't think they can do. So again, I don't think it's like written in stone that's going to happen. I think it is certainly possible. On the Seton Hall thing, the last thing, I think they might be the biggest beneficiaries of this disaster of a season for Rutgers. Because if Rutgers was good this year, they would be like the worst story in New Jersey. They'd be like, what happened to this program that's been consistently good for a decade and a half? Now no one really cares. I mean, no one really cares anyway, right? Let's be completely honest here. But even less people care because everyone's focused on listen, Seton Hall in the worst year of their history, the least wins they've ever had, or I should say the most losses they've ever had, they could point down to Piscataway and say, hey, at least we're not those guys. That's pretty rough.
That's kind of harsh. I don't think
That's a
they're
little
thinking
crazy.
that. I don't think they're thinking that. They're miserable up there. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The only thing better, or I should say better, the only thing close to having your favorite team be good is that your rivals are bad. Is that not true?
That's a good
So,
point.
Yeah, but you could also like see this. The panic at Seton Hall is like, we may never get out. Like, what?
Yes.
How do we get out of this hole?
That's a big thing.
And worrying about yourself is a lot worse than worrying about Rutgers.
Right. Seton Hall has got to come. Seton Hall's got to come forward. I think Rutgers has to do this too. Both programs have to do this, but someone's got to come forward and say, okay, here's what we did wrong. Here's why this didn't work. And here's our path out of it. Like, this is what we're going to do differently. And I'd be very interested to see how both of those programs, like, we've given Steve Peichel a lot of grief for his post-game press conferences. I thought he had another one that you're like, really? Like, against Minnesota for little reasons, but like, don't tell me Minnesota would be in the NCAA tournament in any other conference. That's just bullshit. That's just not. Just don't tell me that. They would be further down. The SEC's better. I don't want to hear it. Minnesota's no good. You beat Minnesota, great, hooray, right? I don't think, like, okay, all right, you're in a tough conference. Big Ten's tough. We get it. Like, this stuff. So at some point after this is over, Steve Peichel, who gave us the GPA one game, who F-bombed the radio one game, who blew off the media one game, is going to have to just come out and after, I don't know when it's going to be, and say, look, this didn't work. Here's why it didn't work. And here's why it's going to work going forward. I mean, here's why I'm the right guy to fix this. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to get back to doing. We're going to be the program that I want us to be. We took a shot on these kids. We saw the upside. We saw potential. It didn't work. That's on me, right? But this is what's going to happen now, right? I want to hear that honest appraisal from him at the end of this thing, and I think fans do too. Like, fans kind of deserve to hear that, as opposed to some of the tough conference. We made the NIT 3 years ago. Zach Martinez got a degree. I mean, I don't want to hear that stuff anymore. I want to hear real answers.
I don't want sand thrown in my eyes. I think if Steve was on his press conferences were on CNN, they'd have to have like a constant fact checker, just like, no, that's not exactly right. Like,
He would be that person. He would be that. What's his name? Daniel Dale. Is that his name? Who's the fact checker?
Yes. The guy who made a career out of fact checking Trump. Yes. Like, Rutgers doesn't have the hardest schedule in the Big Ten. Like, across all metrics, they have the third hardest, which is something. Yeah. It's not the hardest. Like, there's always these little exaggerations that are just unnecessary, right? Like,
the third hardest because Rutgers does not play Rutgers.
Right. Have you ever noticed that the teams at the bottom of the league always have the hardest schedules because they don't play themselves? Right. Yes, that's always kind of a constant here. And yes, the SEC is like leaps and bounds better than the Big Ten this year. It's not even close. Yeah. And also this idea that the teams at the bottom are all beating up each other. Like, doesn't that kind of show that the league is mediocre? Not because, you think that in the SEC, the top half is so much better than the rest.
I mean, he's right. There's no Seton Hall. There's no Seton Hall. There's no bad team in the Big Ten. That is true. Right.
I mean, Washington is not good.
Yeah. All right. That's a good point. Good counterpoint.
Penn State isn't great. Like, what are we talking about? Like, I agree with you. I would like some earnest. This was on me. Not every coach says it's on me because that's the right thing to say. I like some earnesty here. But maybe that'll happen after Big Ten tournament.
I want a plan. Show me the plan. Right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Some more questions. What do you guys think of Pike's coaching in this game against Minnesota? Pick your points. Martini's minutes, senior night, but no PJ Hayes. Odd lineups at critical times. Lost the 11-point lead with the oddest lineup, both Dylan and Ace out for extended minutes and no timeouts used by Pike to halt the Minnesota streak. I would say the timeout that he used when Rutgers did not advance the ball past midcourt was sort of like, it just seems like, a basic basketball thing, but all right, stuff happens. Led to the turnover at the end of the half and they could have won the game. I don't know. I can't nitpick. They won the game. It was a defensive struggle. They got a lot of breaks, which they haven't gotten this year. Minnesota stunk in the free throw line, couldn't hit a 3-pointer to save their lives. That helped certainly. But I mean, I don't know. Did you have problems with the coaching?
No, I mean, like it drives me nuts that he just never lets anything happen. Like he always calls a timeout in crunch time, never lets Dylan Harper just, like when he calls that timeout before he crosses the midcourt, just let the guy dribble up the court in the middle of the Minnesota's chaos. They're either going to foul him when he goes to the line or he's going to score, right? Like they had no answer for him. But again, that's just a personal. I just wish that he'd hold the timeout one time. The sitting Dylan and Ace for 4 minutes in that stretch where Minnesota came all the way back. I think you probably have to play Dylan earlier than that. I know Ace was in foul trouble, so that's a little harder.
Dylan did play 39 of the 45 minutes, so and Ace was in foul trouble. So I'm sure that's part of the reason.
Yeah, well, the 4 minutes he sat, they gave up an 11-point lead.
Right. Yeah.
So, but again, it's hard for me to get fired up about the coaching in a game between 2 7-12 teams in the last game of the regular season. Like they won the game,
right? I'm with you totally. Yep. Dortch, do you think it's strange that Dortch, who had given us some very good minutes down the stretch, hasn't played in the last 2 games? Strange, not really. No, I mean, I don't think he was ready defensively. Pat, I guess we saw some odds. Obole didn't play much at center, didn't play at all in center this game, right? So they clearly, he's going with some guys now at that position, just a different strategy than he had early in the year. So
yeah. That's what I was going to say. Dortch was the answer when Obole was out. That was right. Like that was the whole reason he burned his red shirt in the first place.
Yeah.
So then he doesn't play. It is interesting.
Somerville didn't start. Yeah. Martini started for him. Yeah. It's just a different,
yeah.
Matchups maybe.
Senior day for, a captain of the team for his last game. Maybe that played into it. Yeah. Just really interesting all the way around. But Dortch, I don't know. He definitely improved in my opinion. You definitely saw that improvement. So for him to not play was kind of interesting. Maybe. I did think it was a little weird.
Yeah. I do appreciate that Steve did not do the usual senior night, start all 3 seniors thing, because he's done that in the past. PJ Hayes didn't even play, which, I mean, that's kind of rough, but he clearly, he cut down the rotation. I think it was 10 guys. Didn't play Obole. He played 2 centers. I don't know if this was the game you had to really hammer down and do everything you can to win again, because it doesn't matter. But I don't know. I think the Dortch thing ultimately was a waste of a burned red shirt, right? Like, the kid didn't really have to play. I guess you needed the body, but could have made do without it. But it sounds like it was his decision to burn the red shirt anyway, so it's fine. I just think, allocation of scholarships wise, it could have just been
It's the burns again. Thinking about red shirts in 2025 is just ridiculous to me. I mean, he could be playing for St. Francis at PA next year, and then LaSalle, or who the hell knows. I would not worry about that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just the entire year. If this were one thing, he spent the entire year trying to solve a problem that did not have a solution, and that's center play. Like it's just very simple. Like, and so this is just another shot. And I think Martini played okay. Somerville coming off the bench was okay-ish. I don't know, but they still give up some 40 points in the paint to Minnesota. So what are you going to do? All right.
0 rim protection. The thing with Martini that none of the other centers do is that he gets in the mix. Like he's pushing guys around and he's being physical and he's at least trying to make something happen inside.
He's in the right position off the ball too, which is something that you don't see a lot. Like he knows where to be positioning wise. But it's just a tough matchup when you're 6'6" All right. What ifs? We got a lot of what ifs. I know Brian loves the what ifs. There's nothing like you like better. This is my favorite one. I hate what ifs, but
me too, brother.
What if? I hate what ifs, but here goes. If Rutgers beat Kennesaw, Princeton, Penn State, and Iowa, and Politi won a Pulitzer, would they be in the NCAA field on the bubble or still on the outside looking in? So, okay, I think his point is if they beat the 4 worst teams they lost to, like would they be in the field? I think they'd be on the wrong side of the bubble. What do you think? They'd be on the bubble, but I don't think they'd be in.
It's yeah, I would think they still don't have that the enough at the top tiers to really swing the bubble. Would be my answer. If you just eliminate those should have been wins,
Right.
Let's call them that, right? Should be wins. So I still don't think they did enough at the top to what would they have? They would be 4 games over 500.
They'd be
Yes.
19 and 12. They'd be 7 games over 500.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah, right
where would
there.
be-
Right there. I think they'd be right there, right? 20 games, we said, would probably get them in.
So
If you don't have those bad losses.
they'd have a shot. I don't know where would they and net be at this point? They'd be 10 and 10 in the Big Ten. They wouldn't have didn't have any quality win. I don't know. Good question.
They would have no quad 3 losses, which is really the one major ding on their resume now. But they would still be 4-13 in quad 1, which isn't terrible. It's not great as far as, especially when you're a team right on the edge. I think they'd be on the bubble. I think with the conversation on this podcast would be maybe if they make a run to the quarterfinals, that'll clinch a spot for them, or there will be some hope here.
I'm going to give you credit. So take out Kennesaw. Said they just lost that game. They lost to Kennesaw, but they beat Princeton, Penn State, and Iowa, and also beat Alabama. And you said this early in the year, like this is an opportunity that they blew an opportunity to have a signature win on the resume. Like you got to remember that's a key part of this too. Like these teams that you're looking now, they're looking at the resumes and the bubble teams. They're looking for, they beat Alabama. Looking for good wins, and that's something Rutgers does not have as well.
Yeah. So. How many wins does Rutgers have against teams that are going to make the field?
4, I think.
4.
Is that it? Really? Wow.
Let's
surprised.
To your point, Steve, like Oklahoma has like 6 wins in the SEC, but they're literally one of the first teams in or out because they had an unbelievable non-conference slate, right? So, and also they play in the SEC, which is in fact the best league in the country. So teams in the field they beat are UCLA, Illinois. I think that might be it, to be honest with you.
No.
Yeah, who else did they beat that's in the field?
I don't know.
That's it.
That's what I thought it was not a
Holy
lot.
Cow. Jeez.
Which really shines a light on this whole season.
It certainly does.
Nebraska went from last four in to not even making the Big Ten tournament. So I think we could safely say they're not going to be in the field. Penn State isn't. Notre Dame isn't. I guess maybe, Monmouth got eliminated yesterday in the CAA, so they're not going to win the tournament and make the field. St. Peter's got eliminated, so they're not going to make it. Maybe Merrimack has a miracle run in the NEC. Wagner, maybe in the NEC. I don't know. But
I think they're both out.
UCLA and Illinois are the only teams I see.
Interesting. Wow. Okay.
Well,
so
and
no, they would not be in the
discount-
NCAA tournament with what you described.
If you discount the last 3 seconds against Michigan, that's a pseudo win. That's what Steve said after the game. If you don't count the last 3 seconds, and if you ignore the Purdue game, they're actually playing really good basketball right now.
If Woody had gone directly to the police. All right. I won't even do the next what if because that one will anger you even more. No, it's a good what if.
I want to hear it.
If Rutgers had lost to Notre Dame, Seton Hall, Nebraska, Washington, and Minnesota, and finished 10-21. This is from Max, by the way. Loyal readers know what I'm talking about. And 4-16 in the Big Ten. Would anything be different? In other words, if this were just an absolute bloodbath of a season, the close games they lost, they've lost every close game instead of winning those close games. Would anything be different? No. Not really. Not appreciably. I mean, a little bit. I mean, the coverage would be an absolute. They wouldn't be going to the Big Ten tournament. Season be over. There would be a lot of like, how in the world did this happen? I think it'd be at higher intensity. They might be more of a national story than they are. I thought they'd be more of a national story then, but I think people just sort of gave up on following this in December, January. I don't know. I don't think it'd be much different though.
The long-term ramifications like we have to fire the coach. We need wide-scale changes. Like none of that would be different. Right. None of that would be different.
Still signed through 2031. Still don't have an AD or president. You still don't have any.
The roster would still be the same situation.
Right. Yep. Still going to bring back 3 or 4 guys in the roster. You're not. You still have to get 3 guys. Yeah. I don't think that's going to change.
I'd say the scrutiny would be a little bit bigger. Because right now they kind of just suck a little bit. If they had lost all those games, they'd really suck. Yeah. Like they. So I think there is some difference there. Again, materially, nothing would change, right? The team still would be well short of its goals. I think the perception would be a little bit, because right now, like people that want to defend things still have some room to make their argument. Not great argument, but an argument. If
Right.
they went 4-16 and lost to, again, the worst Seton Hall team in program history and all these other things, then you really have no leg to stand on.
Right. All right. Last question. Has anyone listening to the pod ever been successfully influenced to stay at the Eldridge Hotel from the ads? I mean, I think this is clearly, I mean, what a stupid question. Of course. When you listen to my tones, someone, as I might say, knows a thing or two about a good hotel stay. When you hear me putting my weight behind a fine hotel like the Eldridge in the beautiful heart of New Brunswick, close to the downtown arts district, perfect place to stay for your football weekend. And when you hear me do that, like I do at the beginning of the show, I don't think there's a question that it has had a big influence on the Eldridge spot. Do you guys disagree? I hope you wouldn't disagree with this.
I think I just heard 5 listeners take out their wallet and bring out their credit card to pay for a stay at the Eldridge this weekend.
Exactly, honey. We're going to the Eldridge this way. Where are we going? We're going to New Brunswick this weekend. Why are we going there? Polity. That's good.
People that booked the Eldridge for the season opener against Ohio, that's on a Thursday. They just extended it from Wednesday all the way through Sunday. Forget the beach, baby. We're staying all Labor Day weekend in New Brunswick, exploring the great culinary arts of George Street, watching a theater show at the State Theater.
Yeah,
Nothing
absolutely. Yep. Next year, some Northwestern fans are going to stay at the Eldridge, even though they don't play at New Brunswick. That's the case. That's how good it is. They're going to be like, we're going to the Eldridge Hotel. They're going to wake up on Saturday morning. What time's the game? There's no game. All right. What else we got? Wrestling at the Big Ten tournaments, Pat. How do we do?
It was not great.
Not what
great.
you want?
Not what you wanted. 5 automatic qualifiers out of the weekend. Several, maybe a couple more may get at larges. So the over-under, I think we said 6.5 is going to be under, or it was under coming out of the tournament, maybe over, depending on what happens. But just no one finished higher than 5th. Kind of fell in the seed range. Many people lived up to expectations, but some didn't. I would say, in my opinion, not a great tournament. Rutgers probably should have done a little bit better. But at the end of the day, 5 guys are through. They'll try to make their mark at NCAAs, and that's the goal of the tournament, just to get through. So I think Goody would probably say not good enough, and that's probably the bottom line.
All right. I got nothing else. Rutgers Pro Day this week. Who do we got? I mean, who's participating?
The big name to follow, I think, is Tyrion Powell, who didn't do any of the drills at the NFL Combine. He's slated to go through drills at the Pro Day, and I think he can kind of earn some cachet here, kind of showing what he could do physically. I think obviously he's put together some really good film, especially in 23. But I think right now he probably has to have a good showing at Pro Day to, he was banged up the last year or so to kind of, calm any doubts about him, his physical status at Pro Day. I think he's the biggest name to watch. And then, there's going to be other guys that maybe didn't get invited to the Combine that want to, Shaquan Loyal, Eric Rogers, guys that, certainly have a chance of being UDFAs to put on a show for the scouts. So those are kind of the names I'd be watching.
All right. Women's hoops loses in tournament. No surprise there. Tough year for Cookies Washington, who also will have to completely rebuild her roster. Man, the what else segment has become dark. Because if you guys don't know how we do this, we script the podcast and then I do most of the top part, and then Fonseca and Lanny will come in and add the stuff at the bottom. So I'm seeing this for the first time. It's just like, oof. Man.
How about softball though? 4 straight shutouts by pitcher Ella Harrison.
Why is that not in the what else? I didn't know that.
What happened? 4 straight.
A no-hitter, right?
And a no-hitter in there, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Are they playing real teams? What's going on with that?
Yeah, the last one was over Colgate, but yeah.
Okay.
There were some definitely real teams in that stretch.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a nice start.
I'm going to see Fonseca's going to spend like a week and a half now in the middle of April. We're going to do something on the softball pitcher. It's going to be great. I can't wait.
Probably not.
Can't wait.
And I guess the other positive is that women's lax beat Hofstra.
Okay.
So they have a winning record. The other side is that men's lax got smoked by their rivals Princeton, 11-6. It's ball to 3-4. And baseball went 1-2 against Iowa this weekend. And now they're 6-9 on the season. Although Peyton Bonds, who is Barry Bonds' nephew, is hitting dingers. He hit like a 450 foot home run the other day. And kind of just living up to the last name. So that's if you want one thing to look forward to in the Rutgers baseball season, a reason to go out to Peyton Field, you get to see that guy kind of smash the ball.
Do you think I can get Barry Bonds on the phone to talk about Peyton? If I leave a message, Barry, I voted for you for the Hall of Fame 8 straight times. Would that sway it? Probably not. He does media now. Be a good story. Worth a shot. All right. Anybody has Barry Bonds' number, text me. All right. Anything else, or should we wrap it up? We got to travel, got to pack. I got to pack for Indianapolis. When are you leaving, Brian?
Tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. You're gonna have St. Elmo's without me. I don't get there till Wednesday morning.
I don't think I'm gonna have Elmo's. I'm staying by the airport. I don't know if I want to Uber into the city. I've had Elmo's. I'm falling into your anti-Elmo's propaganda. I'm not as excited as I once was. So.
That's too strong. I'm not anti-Elmo's. It's just I just said a little overrated in the last podcast. We try to have takes on the show. I mean, I'll go. If the game wasn't at 9:00, I'd be there tomorroor night. If there was a 3:00 game, we'd cover the game, bang out our columns, and head straight over. But a little harder. Oh, wait a minute. Idea. Pre-game Elmo's. Pat, what do you think? Could we pull it off? If the game's 9:30 tip.
I think that may be bad working conditions for me. I can't work when I'm full.
You don't want to have a full. You don't want to have a 48-ounce T-bone in your stomach.
I wouldn't want that.
I mean,
but that's just me. That's just me.
Is it really going to affect the content on this team if I have shrimp cocktail on my nose? I don't know. All right, we'll think about that. Maybe we'll see you in Indianapolis. If you're there, let us know. We'll be at Gamebridge Fieldhouse for the Big Ten tournament, and we'll be back next year No, wishful thinking. We'll be back next week to recap that. Thanks for listening.